This meeting will be conducted by audio and video conference without a physically present quorum of the Rock Island City Council due to the disaster declaration issued by Governor Pritzker. Because of this order related to COVID-19 health concerns affecting the state and the city, the mayor has determined that an in-person meeting at City Hall with all participants may not be practical or prudent. Alderpersons and staff may not all be physically present at City Hall due to the disaster, and attendance may be limited. To participate remotely during the public comment or public hearing portion of this meeting, please join by phone at 1-929-777-5624, PIN 200-367-176#.
Thank you very much. Roll call.
Alderperson Robinson.
Present.
Hertz.
Here.
Gilbert.
Present.
Swanson.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Robinson, or excuse me, Poulos.
Wow.
Here.
Both
Can only be in
so
one seat at a time.
So
Oh, I didn't
can see
know
the-
that
I
one.
can see the,
Oh, okay.
Resemblance there.
Okay.
That's easy.
What I'm thinking. Okay, and Healy, Mayor Tomes.
Here. Thank you. Before we can get to you, Angie, we need to do public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Virtual or in the room? Seeing and hearing none, it's all yours.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for giving me a few moments tonight to talk to you about the library. I also want to thank my board members and my staff and the foundation and everyone else that comes. I feel like I have an entourage. It's awesome. But every year I do this report, and it's because it is required by the Local Library Act. So we call it the 410 report due to the number of the Act, 75 ILCS 5/4-10. So we will report to you in writing the condition of our trust, and the board actually will approve the full report at their next meeting on February 21st. And then according to the statute, the full report will be submitted to the city clerk and to the finance director at that time. So we will just jump right in. At this point in the calendar year, this slide is somewhat misleading and confusing. Once the audit is complete, it will make more sense, but I put some notes at the bottom that explain why there's such variances between projected and revised and actual. So I will go in more depth at the next slides, but this kind of gives you an idea of we had to move a lot of money this past year for our Watts Midtown project for the ARPA money, and then we did receive a grant that was pretty large that kind of threw things off. So this is probably of more importance. Shows you where our revenues come from. Our city library and Milan Blackhawk District tax make up 86% of our revenues, and then the state money is 2%, and as you can see, the rest is lower except for other, and that's it's a little different this year because of the same reasons that I just explained, that we had money taken out of our reserve fund, ARPA funds, and then the grant. So normally taxes would range between 90 and 92% of our revenue, but because of that, other tracks higher in 2022. So budgets are fluid. Expenditures. Here's how we spend our money, and these are the easiest ways to break it down. 62% personnel, supplies at 5%, services at 16%, other, which I'll explain in a minute. We have the bond repayment, the city services payment, and our contingency fund. So, in more detail, here you go. If you notice on the right-hand side of the next few slides, it'll show you what was included in this actual line item. So personnel, it's full and part-time staff, insurance, IMRF, FICA, Medicare, longevity, and fringe. Personnel being 62% of our expenditures, that's a rather low number for a service industry. Our staffing has remained consistent over the past 6 years. As you'll see on this slide, we are down 11 people since 2013, so that's 24% of our workforce we've lost over the last 10 years. And a lot of people ask, how do you manage that, considering our locations and our mobile? Well, we have adjusted the hours. We're open less hours in any one spot. And then the reorganization of staff, and then, libraries have changed. Duties have changed. Some things are automated now that maybe weren't back then. Believe it or not, 10 years is a long time. And then we are just doing more with less. That's what all the city departments do. So I wanted to mention that. Our supplies, they're higher in 2022 because we had to purchase startup supplies for the Watts Midtown Library. These numbers, they vary because we do a lot of bulk ordering. So there'll be years where we'll buy, say, a lot of toilet paper that maybe the next year we don't need to buy as much. So it's in like another year line item. So you'll see that that number kind of fluctuates, but I would say on average it runs around $80,000 to $90,000 a year. Let's see. Services, this one is just going to keep going up. This category grows leaps and bounds mainly due to inflation and supply chain issues. So these are our maintenance service contracts, our electronic library materials. They're very expensive but very used. That includes our databases and online reference services. Those items used to be, if you haven't been to a library since school or whatever, they used to all be print, and they're not anymore. They don't even offer them that way anymore. So we have to spend money on the online versions. We have some licensing we have to do, and also some certifications. So I don't expect that number to ever go down, regardless of how many buildings we have, because our online resources aren't tied to a building. They're tied to your population most of the time and your cardholder base. So just as a side note, we contract for things like cleaning and snow plowing and things that maybe the other city departments don't. I don't know if people know that, so I thought I would throw that one in there too. And then we have other. So this is higher in 2022, again, because of our new library. These are the physical library materials. We also have a very small amount in dues and continuing education for staff. We are really fortunate. We can do a lot of our continuing ed for free through our library system. And then we have our promotions and communications and other. The way we afforded to purchase our opening day collection for the Watts Midtown Library was we carried some over from previous years that we hadn't spent. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means with our reserve funds. But so that's how we were able to spend so much money on the other category in 2022. And then finally, our transfers and contingencies. So we are charged for our general fund charge, which is HR, legal, payroll, all that stuff. We also have in that our fleet. So we have a leased truck for our deliveries. We have the library car, which was paid for by a grant, but there's still some costs associated with that. And we have our mobile library in there. Then the number's going to fluctuate with grants. So our $50,000 grant from the state this year would have gone in there. So really, that's one that's always going to be very fluid and different from year to year, especially because of the capital improvements. I'm really hoping that that settles down, because when we received the money for the bond for the JCI project for our downtown library, we had to pay on them. So that came out of, I think, this. And now that we're just paying the bond back at $89,000 a year, that should lower that amount. So then the 410 asked for a statistical review, and we are definitely bouncing back since COVID. The 410 is only interested in our collection and our loans. So after we kind of go through this a bit, I'm going to tell you about some other things that are pretty exciting. We had in-house materials. That's about where we average around 170,000 items available. Those are print items. And then we have our circulation. That was up 6%. Online circulation was up 16%. If you'll notice, it makes up a lot, over a third of our circulation every year, and it just keeps going up. Database usage, again, that is for things like streaming services, downloadable ebooks, magazine articles, things that were only in print at one time. So that's up 15%. And then interlibrary loan, we really rocked interlibrary loan this year, apparently at 29% increase. So our number of library materials used went up 9%. Our patron contacts, which is anything we had to do that required staff intervention, topped 230,000 plus this year, so that was up 17%. A lot of that is because people are coming back into the buildings. We have over almost 14,000 registered borrowers. That's up 2%. And that is active borrowers, so we don't let people stay on the books if they don't use their cards. We had over 600,000 services used, and that includes all of our website hits, social media, video downloads, computer use, things like that is a huge category. That was up 44%. Again, that can be attributed to being back in business for face-to-face. And then program attendees, per the Illinois Public Library annual report, we had to change the way we kept those statistics. So we had over 53,000 program attendees, and we had that via in-house attendees, off-site, so when we go to like Schwiebert Park for Fright Night and things like that. We have online live attendees who visit our Facebook to watch a streaming program live, and then we have online recorded views, which keep going higher and higher. One of the reasons that we are so able to draw that many people is because we do have a lot of partners, and this is just a very few amount. We have a lot more that will be in the full report. So barely the tip of the iceberg here. Our partnerships mean everything to us, and they allow us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do just on our own. So now we get to the good stuff. Fund requirement is a question of the 410, and all of these slides I've discussed thus far are required, but the fund requirement has a very specific wording, and that is it. I don't know if you had a chance to read this beforehand, but basically the board submits to the council a statement of financial requirements of the library for the ensuing fiscal year for inclusion in the appropriation of the corporate authority and of the amount of money which, in the judgment of the Board of Library Trustees, will be necessary to levy for library purposes in the next annual tax ordinance. So the downside to this is that I do it in February, and the budget actual time that you get to see the budget isn't until November. But in that time, we have worked tirelessly with our awesome finance director and Todd and everyone else with the city to try to get the amount of money into the budget that my board is asking for. So I wanted to highlight exactly what the statute says to give us all that baseline expectations of what we're supposed to be doing. So if you'll recall last year, this time last year, the board requested an increase of $268,168.70 to cover our projected shortfall. Our actual on-paper deficit ended up being $304,000 and change due to increased insurance costs we weren't really expecting. As you may remember, we did not receive an increase in property tax dollars. However, we did receive a decrease of 4.43% in the library tax levy. And that's an important thing to note. And I have a slide that demonstrates how that has gone up and down over the years. So because we were starting in the hole, our fund requirements for next year, we are figuring to be $392,777. And that is why those 4 points underneath inflationary increases and then negotiated personnel costs. So our total property tax dollars needed for 2024 is a little over, well, almost 2.7 million. This would allow us to operate as is with no deficit. Just an FYI, if we had received inflationary increases since 2012, our tax levy dollars, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the CPI, would be 2.6 million. So we aren't far off. And to show you the chart and what I mean by all of this, because I know it's a lot, you'll see on the right side, all the way to the right, the red ones are when our tax levy actually went down. And then the percent of change from the year before is based off the revenue side. So had our levy stayed, say, around 0.44, and then the EAV changed, we would be in line for our inflationary increases. So I will probably go back to this slide. The real question, how do we combat that shortfall? Well, we're similar to schools. Public libraries are crowdfunded by property tax dollars. Regardless if you use this or not, you pay for it. Average is $120 a year per household. So breaking that down, it's an amazing bargain for everybody. By design, we do not charge for our services. We're not an enterprise fund. Consequently, the only way to increase our revenue is to find grants and fundraising opportunities. And then if we focus on the library tax levy, not the dollar amount, that might get us to where we need to be. It's something that we recently discussed in a finance committee meeting with the board and the city manager and the finance director, and so I think that's something we should explore. A little more about the library laws. I feel like it's a little bit of one step forward, two steps back. Our levy has changed. It's unproportionate to the EAV, costing our department revenue, like I say. The statute states that library taxes provided for in this act shall be levied by the corporate authorities, which is you, and the amounts determined by the library board and collected in like manner with other general taxes of the city. And it also must appear separately on the property tax bill. So in other words, the people you appoint for the library board are doing for the library what the city council is doing for the city. And that kind of brings us to, admittedly, we're under a unique governance compared to any other city department. So the library board determines what's needed, presents it to council, which is what I'm doing. And again, think of us as a mini city inside the city. The consistent tax levy would yield revenues that change with the EAV. However, it hasn't historically been done that way. Any sort of gains have been reallocated in the general levy rather than the library levy. And we can go more in depth in that down the road, but I want to give you an idea of why we're in the situation that we're in. I think, again, for 2024, we really need to explore how to change this and what can our levy really be, I guess. Where would you feel comfortable at? So with that, they ask us about accumulations and liabilities. We do have a 90-day reserve. That's per the city finance policy. And we also have assigned reserve funds for capital projects. We now have liabilities due to this JCI project. We did get a newer HVAC and lighting as part of that, and we are required to pay 20 years on that bond. I'm not sure if all the other city departments have to do that or not, but I know we do. Like I said, that's $89,000 a year that, you know, or when you're in the hole, you're in the hole. So the 90-day reserve, that's, like I say, a variable amount. It's based off of our expenditures minus our capital improvements. So right now it's sitting around $880,000. We don't have any money unless that's there until the tax money is collected. So I call it working cash fund. There is a way to levy for a working cash fund, by the way. Libraries actually have 7 different ways they can levy, but we only do the one. I won't go into that. It'll blow your mind. But this money can also be used in emergency situations. So if you look at that, assigned reserve fund, that's our other fund for capital improvement projects. On paper, it looks impressive, $1.127 million. So any money in excess above the 90-day reserve is put into this fund for capital improvements. And that fund has been building over time. When I first started, I want to say it was almost $2.5 million. So we have had to dip into it for different reasons, not necessarily the reasons for what the board has wanted to dip into it for. We have, right now, it is paying for the JCI bond for our operating deficit for this year. The board made a pledge of $350,000 of that money for the furniture and equipment items at Watts Midtown. We have our downtown elevator being fixed starting tomorrow, so downtown will be closed for a few days so we can get a brand new innards of the elevator, so it will stop grinding, which will be great. And then we have other downtown improvements. So the balance looks huge, but when we get to the downtown projects, and you start subtracting all of those things from the other slide, we only have $384,558 available when we have $977,000 worth of projects that need to be done downtown. So if we were to do all of those projects at the same time, you could add probably another 10% for general contracting fees. So it's not we don't have enough. And those are the items that I've asked for the CIP projects as well as for the ARPA funding. So they shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But what do you get for it? I mean, really, I want to end on a positive note before I answer any questions. We really do focus on equitable access and additional services. We have multiple locations for our very unique community, as well as the Library to Go, which does outreach, and we deliver homebound items for people who cannot leave their home for usually medical reasons. We do now online and virtual. If there's anything that has really worked out well for the library with COVID is that kind of forced us to learn how to do some of that stuff. School outreach is incredible. We do it both with our Library to Go as well as in the buildings. I can't speak highly enough about our print, online, and streaming resources. We always get great feedback from patrons that we have one of the best collections in the Quad Cities. And then our trained librarians who can help answer your questions, which is becoming more and more important as unreliable information is scattered throughout the world on a daily basis. In fact, it's so important that starting next year, the high school is requiring an information literacy class per the state laws. We hope to play a part in that too. So here's some pictures because we had an awesome year, 150th year to be exact. Some of those are from our rock ceremony and our party. We had tons and tons of people at, at programs throughout the year. I think, yeah, that's Fright Night in the bottom center. So many people. Our summer reading kickoff, back to school bash. We were at the Spring Forward party. I mean, these are programs and things available for all ages. We really focus on the learning and fun, personal enrichment, place to be. Really, it's a place to go where nothing is expected. There's no entry fee for people. You can just be there. And that means a lot to a lot more people than you probably would think. With that, I want to welcome 2023. Literacy does come in many, many shapes and forms. We work with reading, math, computer, financial, health, job searching, family searching, how to navigate the city. We get a lot of people that want to know more about the city, how to navigate life, how to be an adult. Sometimes those are things that are easy to take for granted, and not everybody has that basic knowledge. We have tons of discussions and programs and communications that we really work with people on. I can't tell you how much staff are amazing and how we love coming to work and helping people every day. And I always put this on because it's a reminder that we do help the city's goals in any way that we can, and I encourage you to use us for that. Our reason that people do move here, who visit here. When we had a different library system network, we used to be able to tell you how many Moline cards were used or how many East Moline cards, and it was a very significant number. So people come to our city because of us. So I'm all in favor of promoting that. I'd be glad to work with Sarah on that. I think that's awesome. And again, thanks for my staff working extra hard to make the library a special place. Had this amazing collections. Thanks for the board for volunteering their time. The foundation, who I didn't really touch on because they're their own entity, they're a component unit. They do provide their audit to the city finance department. That money is very restricted. And I want to thank the council and mayor for keeping an open mind and wanting to learn more about the library. It is the greatest place on earth. I will open it up to questions. Yes.
I got a question. Going back to page 6 of your presentation regarding the library personnel.
Yeah.
Just so I understand, so in 2022, we have 34 people and 25.63 FTEs, and 2023, same amount of people, slightly, okay, half a person more, I don't know.
Yeah, we
And
changed the job to full-time.
So I'm trying to figure out how does that equate to the $174,000 difference, roughly?
A lot of it is raises and insurance, and when you move a part-time person to full-time, I mean, automatically that could be up to a $25,000 change right there. But when you times it by the people that have those benefits and things, that's really where it comes from. I'd have to go and do the math for it to the penny. These are projected. The projected cost. I think last year our projected cost was somewhere around 1.78 million, so it didn't come in at that.
So,
So-
and I guess the reason I'm asking, because if we historically go back a little bit, seems like that cost has been roughly the same throughout, although there's been variables and people and FTEs along the way. That just seems like the biggest jump of any period, at least in this chart here.
Yep, and it's projected, like I say, we didn't spend everything we had budgeted last year for it, which would have been over 1.7. It's because we had positions open throughout the year. So it's a little misleading, and then also I had one person retire that cut a salary in half, so it saved us probably with insurance $80,000 right off the top. And when they were rehired for, that next person came in a lot lower and didn't take the insurance.
So my follow-up question, and that'll be my,
Come up. Mallory, I knows.
I might be able to add a little bit to that as well. So last year, we had a separate cleaning contract and security personnel contract at the downtown library, which we went ahead and kind of bidded that out again. And we decided, after running all the numbers and presenting it to the board, that it would be cheaper to turn the downtown library cleaning and the security personnel contract into a full-time position. It actually cut our costs by a decent amount. But however, it did shift some of our costs from our service contract line into our personnel line, even though it did save money.
There you go.
and my last question is,
Oh, thanks.
so with the addition of the Watts Midtown branch, which by the way is a wonderful facility,
Thank you.
what, I guess I'm looking at staffing. Is this number then correct, or is there additional staff, or did you transfer staff from one location to another, or can we expect this number to change?
No, we just transferred staff from one location to another, and we modified hours. So we're open 144 hours right now with all 3 locations plus the mobile by closing the downtown library earlier at 6 instead of 8.
Okay, all right, thank
So
you.
I don't expect it to go up. Would I like it to go up? Absolutely, because everyone's working really hard.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So, when do you get your first tax money disbursement?
I don't know. I think April? Linda, do you know? Like April?
The city does.
I can't hear you. I don't know off the top of my
Okay,
head.
but it's probably not till like May, June, somewhere around there, like half the year. So I just want to point out on slide 21, you know, where we've got our working cash at $880,000, that's pretty close to covering half a year of expenses before the library gets any money for that year. So I don't want anyone to think that because they've got $880,000 that they're flush with money, because that is a working capital, because they're putting in a half a year of personnel costs, operating costs, supply costs without any money. So that's where that money comes. And then if you go to slide 22, you know, when you're looking at the reserved funds, I mean, those are restricted reserved funds. So technically, the operating deficit, which quite frankly, council has caused library to have, shouldn't be coming out of it there, but that's where it's coming out of. But if the elevator needed to be replaced, the city doesn't pay for that. The library has to pay for that. The catalytic converter was stolen off of the mobile library. City doesn't pay for that. The library has to pay for that. So, you know, when you look at the library being a fiscally responsible department and having 90 days of cash on hand to cover that 6 months they go without getting any payment from the city, and then also having to have the reserve funds to pay for things such as an elevator, emergency things that come up that the city does not and probably will not pay for, the library has to have funds to go ahead and cover that. So, you know, when you look at these numbers, it's a little bit of a misnomer that the library is flush with money, because technically they're not. And when you look at the slide with each of the revenues, the tax revenues on it, you know, everybody knows that the cost of living has gone up, the cost of expenses has gone up, everything's gone up like somewhere between 5 and 10%, but yet the library was given the exact same amount of money to the penny that they were last year, with no account for any increases. And to be quite honest, I don't know how we expect the library to function with just increases in everything going on, but we're not giving them anything to increase. And so I guess my comment to the council is the library board takes an in-depth look at the finances when they present what the levy should be. Council every single year cuts that levy in half or more. So when the comment comes up that the library is in deficit, is a deficit fund, I just want us to be aware of the fact that we created that deficit fund for them by not allocating to them the money that they actually need to operate. And I think those things kind of get lost in the presentation, that those don't get called out, and so I just wanted to call them out.
Angela, I had two questions. First, thanks for everything that you do. You and your staff and the foundation, everybody do a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Love the library. It is a weird system, though. It's a city within a city. Does state statute allow for alternative organizational structures? Do other communities have elected library boards that have the authority to levy their own property taxes?
We'd have to turn into a district, and then the city would lose all control over anything. So then the elected officials, depending on who's elected, could really make it great or could make it absolutely terrible.
Isn't that the fun of democracy?
It is. It is.
All right, well, I mean,
It's a possibility. I don't know all the ins and outs. There's definitely laws on it that Dave probably knows about. There you have to go to referendum and things and then figure out what you want your tax to be.
okay.
I don't know if it doesn't pass, if it stays with the city. That's my question. That'd be kind of interesting, but not a fan of that because you guys are awesome and extend your home rule
Okay,
privilege.
so that would not be supported by the library board? By the
We'd
foundation?
have to have the talk about it.
I would encourage you to have a talk, because I don't think that the structure makes much of any sense.
All the libraries around here are like this. There's only 72 city libraries in Illinois.
Sure.
And so we actually meet monthly on all these weird things that we all do it different.
Sure. The other thing, you mentioned multiple levies that are available to Illinois libraries. Why have you not explored additional levies?
I have with former finance directors, and part of it is the corporate levy is the easiest way to do it because there's no, you have to spend it on this, you have to spend it on that. You can move money between line items very easily. Those levies are probably available to the city to levy too. So there's a IMRF one, buildings and grounds one, there's audit one, there's different ones, so.
Is there any input from the library board or the foundation board as to whether we should explore adding a new levy for additional services?
I can bring it up.
Yeah, I would welcome feedback from the library board and the foundation board, both on exploring alternative corporate structures and levies. I see your predicament, and I'm not entirely sure that the current structure allows for resolution. That needs to happen, so that's my input.
Sure, thank you. And the tax disbursements do come in June, the first ones. According to Linda. Thank you, Linda.
Got a question?
So, well, first of all, I think your staff is awesome. And I can only speak to the adult programming. I just attended their Tuneful Tuesdays concert
Yeah.
that Andre from the Sound Conservatory did. Awesome. Very well received. The room was packed. So I have a question about the cost of all the repairs, upgrades, whatever are needed at the downtown library. So you have a total cost there. So where is that money gonna come from?
Well, we have the $384,000 available. So we are looking for grants. The state has an awesome grant that hasn't been released yet for this year. For about 8 years, they didn't appropriate any money to it, and they just started again. So like Galesburg Public Library got like $15 million from it. It's a very big grant. You have to match it. So I don't know if I want to spend the money until I know whether or not they're going to release that, because that would be matching funds for it.
50/50 match?
Yeah, which is a good thing, you know.
Everything is
Other than
20%.
that, we could do a capital campaign that, like we did for the Watts Midtown Library, and see if there's any public support to help pay for some of those things. I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say, it was a different percent in Galesburg. They got 15 million, and I think they'd come up with 5 million.
Oh, okay.
So-
Maybe for new construction, it's
Could be,
different.
could be, yeah.
I don't know. I'll look into it some more.
Okay. So on the slide about your assigned reserve fund, that fee payment for the Watts Midtown branch, you mentioned it was like,
It's furnishings, it's FF&E.
right, is
Yeah.
that part of that debt that you had to, that agreement you had to sign?
No, this
So-
is shelving, computers, all of the furnishers.
150,000 plus that other debt?
Yeah, we're still in debt to that project, by quite a bit, but we still have 3 years or so to fundraise, we're hoping.
So that was my question.
Yeah.
So what's the amount we owe on that, plus how much time do you have to pay that off?
I don't know if there's been any more change orders since the last amount that I received, but I believe it was around $420,000 was our part of it.
And you have 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay.
Is that right, Kathy, about that? 3 to 4, and it's about 420.
Okay.
You know, our original goal was 7.26 million, which we hit, and then it was 7.8, and which we hit, and now with the shipping and all that stuff, it just went, we didn't add anything, it just went up, and up.
I think they finally got to 8 million or something they've raised, but it was a
Yeah.
$9.9 million
Yeah.
project total overall.
Yeah.
So are you allowed to, I know for Tuneful Tuesdays, you have like a sponsorship. There's a
Mm-hmm. Yep,
couple that, are you allowed to do sponsorships for various programming? Because I know
Sure.
you've really like expanded your programming in the last few years.
And that is a very limited line item for us. I want to say maybe $5,000 a year is what we have in our budget, and then the rest is from our foundation and then outside sponsors. So anyone would like to sponsor a program, we would take that. It usually runs through the foundation, and then it is trickled through one of our transfers or contingency line items. So again, if there's a big sponsorship, that would change that line item. It's just such a it's like the butterfly effect. It's a delicate balance.
I did walk through the new state representative through the library, the Midtown one today.
Oh,
The ad hoc one, excuse me, meeting. We walked through both the Y and the library and was very impressed.
oh, great.
And was wanting to be helpful throughout, in the future.
Oh,
So Greg Johnson was very
yeah.
impressed.
Great, thank you.
So,
Anything else?
In reference to this slide, I think what you were suggesting was that you keep the property tax rate the same, and then when the EAV goes up, your levy goes up.
Yeah, if you keep the tax levy the same and the EAV goes up, then the dollar amount should go up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The dollar amount is what commonly is referred to as the levy, and the rate is what drives the levy in the EAV, yeah.
Yeah. Can be figured a couple ways.
Any
I
other
love
questions?
Illinois.
Yes. Any questions, comments?
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much
Appreciate
to
it.
the board, both foundation and the
Yes.
board, and all the work the staff does. It's great. Thank you. Mr. Jones is up next.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. In anticipation of our request to access some of the ARPA dollars that was endorsed by the City Council coming up in 2 weeks, thought it'd be a great idea to talk more about where we are with the West End revitalization project at this point in time. You will recognize this presentation because I think you saw it maybe in December. I made just a few changes, and I'll focus on those slides that have the changes to it. Let you know where we're at, and then take your questions if that works for everyone. If I go through too fast through something, please stop me. I'm happy to go back. But as you can see, since we last met, we have changed from West End Renaissance to West End Revitalization, showing you that our steering committee has started to take control of this process, as it should. I'm sure you remember some of the assessment results, which resulted in the recommendation that we focus on civic capital, assets and incomes, housing stability and quality, economic vitality, infrastructure, and visual design. Yes, very bold, very broad goals. But in order to do so, we are preparing a neighborhood revitalization strategy in concert with CED. In fact, they're doing the work. I'm not anywhere near it. And again, we are working on those recommendations based on a collective impact model, which we talked about last time. I'll spare you the short video again unless you'd like to see it.
No.
All right. Again, the collective impact model has these 5 guidelines: a common vision, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and I'm going to spend some time focusing on the backbone support. And that's where the King Center is playing a major role at this point in time. If you can recall, this is a great example of a collective impact structure. Again, A. And currently, the way the steering committee is working, this is the model that we're using thus far. There is a steering committee, and that's on the next slide. And they have met 4 times in the last 4 months, and they are just about ready. In fact, they're recruiting people to be a part of the working groups. And there will be 5 working groups plus 2 others that cross-cut through all of the working groups. Those working groups will start to suss out how are they going to address those areas, which strategies they're going to put in place. And then again, recruit people that will be best fit for those strategies and begin working on them. We are the backbone support at this point in time. And when I say we, I actually mean me. I am the backbone support at this point in time. Here's our steering committee. I hope you recognize some of them. They have been phenomenal and fantastic in their charge thus far. Mr. Isaac Carr, Ms. Vanessa Taylor, Mr. Avery Pearl, Ms. Tila Shore, Ms. Linda Sargent, Ms. Marissa Cantu, and Ms. Rita Jett. They have willingly given up their time for about an hour and a half to 3 hours for every meeting for this project. And I'll tell you what, they are completely invested and excited about the next steps. As you recall, as the backbone, our job is to cultivate that community engagement and ownership, to ensure fidelity to the vision, strategy, and values, support aligned activities, implement shared measurement practices, facilitate advancing policy, and mobilize resources. And I'm going quickly because what this really means is that the steering committee is the strategic group, making sure that everything is aligned with the goals. The backbone is doing the work in the background, setting the meetings, creating the agendas, making sure the connections are being made. As I've learned over the last 4 months, it's been incredibly time-consuming, worthwhile work, needed work in order to actualize the investment, the return on investment, but nonetheless, significant amount of time. And so our request you'll be seeing in a couple of weeks is to access, I believe that what's been allocated, endorsed, $100,000 from ARPA dollars, and we'd like to utilize that to hire an additional contractual staff to start taking on those backbone activities for the steering committee, especially considering that they are moving so quickly into getting working groups in place. Any additional funding that's brought from the ARPA dollars will go to support supplies and equipment and other things that are needed to complete the process. We anticipate that this will be about a year process and possibly longer, depending on what's brought up in the process of the collective impact model. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes?
Hey, Jerry. So, first of all, you just said something that you said it was the 100,000 was endorsed. Is that
Yeah,
even?
I can correct that. It's the $50,000 what was initially endorsed. So, and then we had discussion at the last study session when I presented on ARPA again, and so it would be the additional 50,000.
I don't think that's been officially endorsed by the council yet, has it?
No, he's going to come through in 2 weeks.
I guess it's premature then to say that, then, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of what we wanted to discuss.
Well, that's
Yeah.
fine, but I mean, just on the record, though, that's kind of a premature statement. Right. I guess my next question would be, so if you're thinking this is a 1 or 2 year project, and then you said it could possibly go longer, then is it your thought then to come back to the city again and ask for continued funds to support that position?
No, that could be part of the funding process, but a part of this initiative is to be sustainable into the foreseeable future, and that does require looking for other funding sources outside of the city. There are several opportunities that exist regionally and nationally that will be a part of this process that will be necessary in order to keep this moving forward. I can't imagine which funding source to be accessed, but no, it's not the intent of this process to continue to come back to the city in this fashion to fund it moving forward.
So I guess my other question would be, why was this not and I'm not trying to get on you, I'm just saying, why was this additional not requested additionally if that was the plan all along and put into this number? It seems like we've already went over some numbers, and then this thing just kind of popped up. So I feel like, why was this additional person?
You mean
not
the person?
hired, the one that we're discussing here?
This has actually been part of the process the entire time. Perhaps we didn't make it clear to City Council, but
Did
it's
not.
always been our intention to bring someone on board to take over this process.
So I guess I would ask that in future, just for reference, those things, I think we would like to probably see those earlier on, and, because to us, it looks like it's just something that just kind of was an add-on. So
Sure.
perception or whatever.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
Please.
I don't think it's nothing that's an add-on. After coming up with the working groups, or coming up with the model of the steering committee and the working groups, identifying the work that is being done, that's when that process kind of took place. It's nothing that was just thrown up. We've seen the workload now, so now we're looking for additional help to ensure that that's successful going forward. That's a lot of pressure we're putting on the King Center staff in order to do that obligation.
Dylan, did you have a question?
Do you have this is just curiosity, not really substantial, like everybody's talking about here. I didn't mean to interrupt. Is there a job title? Neighborhood coordinator, project?
Going to have that discussion with HR tomorrow, but West End Revitalization Project Coordinator is the working title.
Okay. Well, and I guess to add something a little bit more substantial, since I have the microphone, I see this similar to what we had to do with the downtown. In order to get the downtown organized, the city had to cough up an initial down payment, if you will, that has resulted in hiring somebody that figured out, how do we make this sustainable? And now that organization is not coming back. Well, I guess they kind of did, but they've created a sustainable funding model outside of just coming back to city coffers, right? So this is a similar method I see of an initial down payment from the city via ARPA funds to figure out, how do we fund this thing sustainable without having to constantly come back to the city? You have my support.
A great example of looking for outside sources, of course, has been John Deere's incredible support with this project thus far, with approximately, over $235,000 invested in this project. And with some interest in continuing to support this project moving forward. I certainly can't commit them, but they have given us the seed money to move this far.
So Jerry, how do you see the initial, we'll just say right now, until this other comes across, this initial money from John Deere and the initial city investment into this group or this revitalization, how do you see this? I know there's still meetings to take place, but I think I'd like to see, nothing related to this. I'm just kind of wondering where those dollars, where you see those going, like in what, I mean, I know there's a vision, and is it for infrastructure? Is it for communications? I'm just trying to see where this money is really.
The money from ARPA? The vast majority will be vested in that person facilitating the
Okay,
process.
for this particular 50, I'm talking the original 50.
Both.
Both.
Both. It's the $100,000 total for this individual, and supplies.
Not
and that sort of-
entirely for this individual, but the bulk would be.
Yeah.
Do you have a detailed budget for how to spend this $100,000?
I do not have a detailed budget at this point in time. I am going to be spending some time discussing what is the what should be the amount for the individual, starting tomorrow with a contractual employee. But when looking across the nation and regionally in regards to this position, it's reasonable to expect a cost of $50,000 for an individual. That is before fringe benefits.
Contractual people don't usually get fringe benefits.
Exactly. Not trying to lay all my cards out before we negotiate with an individual yet, though.
Okay. Are you done? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Nope,
interrupt. but-
I'm done.
Why did the steering committee change it from West End Renaissance to revitalization?
Renaissance seemed to have a more defined end, and that's not what they wanted. This is an ongoing process beyond them, and so that was the major reason. And the title revitalization is a little bit more accessible, understandable to those they're trying to reach.
Fair enough. There's also already the Rock Island Renaissance, which is confusing.
That did come up, thanks, yeah.
Judith, did you have another question?
Oh, yes. So I guess I'd like to see a budget. So some of this work can't be done by, like, say, you have a resource development person?
Absolutely
instead.
not. It's outside of her, well, she does have a particular skill set that does lend to this, but that's anomalous to that individual. And frankly, with our resource development manager, we're already overburdening her with communications. That's really a strong part of our resource development.
Any other questions, comments?
I just want to make a quick comment. This approach is totally different than typically what we do. When we do neighborhood plans or studies of how to improve a neighborhood, when I first came on council, I researched all those, and they're sitting on the archive somewhere. This is different. This is ongoing, sustainable. So the approach is going to be a little bit different, where we have the community buy-in. The community is going to drive this. Right now, it's just kind of stabilizing everything to ensure that they have success going forward. The concern that the community has is that this is going to turn out to be the same thing that it always has. We pour in tons of hours of work, of research, and then it goes nowhere because we have no funding. So it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to expand going forward. We just got to have a little bit more time to assure that those things are lined up correctly. We want to ensure that we get it correct, get it right. We don't want to rush anything. We don't want to, give indications that this is how it's going to be and this is what we're going to work on. We want to make sure that we have every working thing in place correctly going forward.
So Jerry, sorry, Judith, go ahead.
I forgot one question. So the money that John Deere is invested, that's already spent, correct?
It's going to be spent on our consultant for the most part, yes.
Oh, there's still a consultant?
Yes, they are helping to facilitate this process with us.
Okay. So I remember when the DC consulting firm
Same group.
presented to us. And all I remember from that was like, so there wasn't enough time to really dig into their recommendations. And I thought that at some point in the near future, and I don't even remember when that was, that you were going to come back and we were going to discuss those recommendations.
Excellent point. And that is going to be the work of the working groups. Each recommendation is underneath one of those 5 impact areas, and they're going to take some time to explore those so they can discuss what is really viable, what is really reasonable to move forward on. And it's that point in time that I think that City Council will be made aware of what those citizens of this area would like to see.
So in those recommendations, was there a recommendation for financial literacy programs? Do you remember?
Under assets and income, yes.
Okay, so there was.
Yes.
Because I've been pushing for that through ARPA, that we should make that available. People in our community.
Okay.
But, okay, go ahead, Randy, I'm sorry.
Just to go back just a little bit, because either I forgot to write it down or something. Could you state again where you were proposing your additional funding sources moving? I know you talked about getting some. I guess again, back to the thought of, if this is a revitalization and there's no real endpoint? I would assume that this position that you would like us to basically spearhead this new hire, and if that goes longer than that 1 to 2 years, again, I'm just kind of wondering where you anticipate those extra funds coming to, because I'm sure you're just not going to say, okay, well, you're done and we'll go on our own in 3 years. If this is an ongoing investment or an ongoing program, what were those funding sources again, if you don't mind?
I'm not going to be able to give you a list of funding sources, but I can tell you this, that there's been federal grants, national or state grants that support collective impact models like this. Let me give you a good example of taking a leap of faith in this regard. When I came back to the Martin Luther King Center in 2016, we received a capacity building grant for approximately, I don't know, $30,000 to $50,000. Allowed us to hire a resource development officer who was in charge of raising dollars so that we could support that and grow the King Center. We've seen phenomenal success with that. This is not that different. Part of the responsibilities of the steering committee, working groups, the West End Revitalization Project Coordinator would be to look at funding sources moving forward. Also, our consultant will be looking at those as well. So while I can't tell you that United Way is going to fund this, I can let you know that we will be addressing or seeking funding from a variety of places. What does play well in our favor is that collective impact models across the nation are gaining resonance, gaining momentum. The fact that we are looking at an area, 3 census tract areas are some of the most distressed areas in in Illinois, gives us, unfortunately, a leg up with some of those national grants. Again, there are no guarantees, but frankly, that's the world the nonprofit lives in, that there are no guarantees, but you consistently look for a variety of sources to fund these efforts moving forward.
Including the John Deere Foundation.
And my last question, how often can the council expect to be updated on movement within this and updates on, receiving of grants, and I guess just an update on where we are with this? I mean, is it something that you expect to come back and give the council updates every 3 months, 6 months? What do you anticipate?
Certainly at whatever rate you would like, but quarterly I think would be quite reasonable for this group.
I would agree. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Once again, and thanks to the committee, the steering committee, for their hard work. It's great.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay. We need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on it? Roll call.
Alderperson Robinson.
Aye.
Hurt.
Aye.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Parker. Pulis.